Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Cut the Shit, a podcast series that aims to take a closer look at the impact of the IT industry, both the good and the bad. Cut the Shit is brought to you by Plow Networks, a managed IT services company based just outside Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bryan Link, EVP of Products and Services here at Plow, and I'll be your host for this series. I'll ask questions, and with the help of our guests, try to dig deep on some of the key challenges we all face dealing with IT. So with that, let's cut the shit and get started. On today's episode, I am pleased to host another edition of Cut the Shit After Hours, our semi-regular series where I sit down with the co-founders of Plow Networks, Bryan Law and Cameron Plato, and have a free-ranging conversation about a topic or two of interest. Today is our end-of-year podcast. We'll be taking a break until after the first of the year, so we figured we'd go out with a bang. We were supposed to record this face-to-face last Friday, December 9th, as a sort of pre-game show for our company holiday party, which happened later that night. Unfortunately, we had to postpone that recording as Cameron was laid low with illness and Bryan had a family emergency. But here we are today, Monday, December 12th. We are resilient, if nothing else. So while it won't be as festive as it would have been, it will still be fire, as the kids say these days. We're going to hit on a grab bag of barely related topics, everything from the sales shenanigans that go on at year end, to some pontification about small business versus big business, and the difficulty of predicting the future, along with the usual trash talking. Enjoy. Okay, let's get to it. Our drinks have been poured and the fire is blazing. Not really. So let's talk a little bit of year-end magic. And by magic, I mean sales magic. You know, those deals that seem to come out of the woodwork during the last month of the year. Given that the two of you guys used to be salesmen or sales professionals, as I think they as you like to call yourselves when you're a salesman. Since that's a big part of your past, I figured you might be able to talk a little bit about that. Can you give us a couple of examples of some year end or end of quarter or any of that kind of stuff? Let's stick with year end since that's where we are. But maybe give us a little bit of examples of some of the things you've seen that made sense and that didn't make sense. So I'll leave it there for you two to jump in.
Well,
I'll let you take that first. Since you're on the VAR side, the VAR side played Let's Make a Deal much more than the telecom side.
You guys can imagine you've been party to even some of those shenanigans during our iteration of Plow. So first, I don't play that game too well.
Yeah, I would say I'd say we're recovered. Like, you know, we've been through the 12-step program. Like, you know, we're in a meeting. Hi, my name is Bryan. I'm a recovering, sales discounter or something. I don't know what that, whatever that is, but.
Yeah, I'll tell you. There's certainly what I think is an acceptable way to do it, and I think there's an unacceptable way to do it. It's just obtuse and awkward for everybody. So, if somebody has if the stars align, and what I mean by that is if the buyer and the seller both have a compelling need or an interest in doing business within what I would call acceptable timeline. Like, if the difference between cutting a purchase order on the 28th of January and cutting it on the 18th of December versus cutting it on the 18th of January is not that big of a deal to either party based on the, the financial timeliness of things. Make it worth the customer's while. Sure, that's the type of deal that might come about and say, hey, seller's trying to get the deal closed before the end of the fiscal year. Customer doesn't really care that much either way when it hits their books. So, because most everybody's doing accrual-based accounting anyway, so the deal books when the deal books, not the other way around. So, if it's customer's going to buy it anyway and it's worth incenting them to get it done sooner, sure, why not? I'll present that. But if somebody's coming to me out of left field in our position to try to force something down somebody's throat, 30, 45, 60, 90, even worse, sometimes 6 months in advance, that's ridiculous. And the kind of stuff you hear from the manufacturers, like, no, this is a really good deal. I'm like, here's the thing. You got to remember, customers aren't that stupid. Like, if you put that deal in front of them in December, I guarantee you in February, you go, that deal's passed. They're going to go, bullshit. That deal's the same deal now. If you can do it in December.
And how much of what we're talking about here got created is now, it's really a function of something that happened a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, because someone started this, and it's like a Ponzi scheme, right? Once you start, you cannot stop, right?
You can't catch up. And so The other thing is, like, I get the more ridiculous ones are the ones where someone hasn't thought through it, and I get this kind of shit all the time. So you'll get somebody from the manufacturer side go, well, I know they don't need it till July, but if they could just buy it in December, then we'll discount it by like 20%. I'm like, okay, 20% equates to, let's just make up a number, $100,000. I'm like, but it's going to cost, they're going to burn more than $100,000 worth of use of that between now and July. So until and unless it's, to their advantage, like, do the math before you come talk to me about that stuff, because I'm not going to go sit in front of the customer.
Okay.
Or better yet, I'll do that and make them look like the idiot that they are.
All right, so we've laid out the obvious shit that needs to be cut around this particular, right, at this level. But let's go back a little. Let's go just step in the time machine.
You sound excited.
Yeah. I was gonna say, and Law, I know you said on the telco side this was not necessarily your bag back in the day, but give me some specific examples of shit that you guys had to do where you literally like, I can't believe I got to take this to a customer. Because I know that there has to be that had to be there that you had to deal with.
Did you go in bullshitting yourself that it was okay, or did you go in and be like,
right, and that's what I'm saying. Did you know that, or were you like looking back on it like, I was fucking kidding myself about that one?
Are you asking me specifically?
I'm asking both of you. Yeah, since you both seem so excited to answer.
Just say that, like, I never felt comfortable. I never felt comfortable with that at all. Like from the very beginning, and I didn't feel comfortable walking in, on a cold call and saying, I'm here to see the boss, and turning my back like they taught us to do, back in the day. And I never felt comfortable taking some half-cocked deal into a customer. My whole being. Now I was around a lot of people that did, but my whole being was always like, if you want to get the best deal, this is when you can do it. Like this is how the pump is primed, right? So
if you want to try to make it work for you, you can, right? I mean, yeah.
To me, it was always so silly, in that it was always at the end of something, right? It was at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, and buyers that hadn't picked up on that, they always cracked me up. They're like, it was like giving. So I would just take and present it. Now I heard call after call after call with that rep that's trying to make quota, or with that sales manager that needs to make the number, and this deal's all wrapped up in it. The funny thing to me is the giveaway that takes place in order to get something that accomplishes the end of the fill in the blank month, quarter, year, and the margin that you lose as a result of somebody just not doing their job and running a good business. And it's acceptable. It's like, Johnny got the deal. He freaking got the deal. And it's like, he could have got it at 60 points, right? If you all just waited, but instead he got it at 20. But you got the revenue. So boom, there you go. The flash is in the house.
It's so ridiculous that now I will say, when someone does come to us and there is an opportunity, I'm like, I will take it to them. I mean, if it's natural, it's great. If it's unnatural, it's forced.
Yeah,
those aren't good deals. I mean, your customers can take advantage of it if they want, but
right. That's different though. That's sort of it's not forced if the customer is the one making the choice, right? I mean, they're obviously they're making the choice. They decide whether they want to buy or not. But the pressure and the arguments being made on behalf of the deal is what we're talking about. Is really where the issue is.
The economics of it all is so nonsensical. It's
crazy.
Going to do. I failed to do it, so I'm going to give it away so that we hit our forecast, but at the same time we lose money. It's
a celebration. It's a celebration. Like,
yeah.
It is like Johnny kicked the winning goal. Johnny wasn't even on the field. Like, what I mean? Like he didn't even play the whole quarter. Like, but
it wasn't a winning field goal. That's Johnny kicked the field goal. You actually lost, right? I mean, because
he got to come back. He didn't get fired. But everybody's happy. It's like, what? Hey, Cameron, I don't know if you remember this, but so I without having exposure to really the VAR business as we started this company, we were a handful of years in, 3 or 4 years in, and Cameron was out of town. And I went and sat in on a meeting that was one of our manufacturing partners really on the software side, and I'm gonna protect the innocent. I'm gonna protect the guilty.
You gotta protect the guilty. Yeah, exactly.
And I'm sitting in this meeting with some people on the customer side, the client side, that I know very well, and they're dear friends. As a matter, a couple of them are dear friends, as a matter of fact. And I watched this vice president literally sit. They go through. You remember Cameron's fishing in Costa Rica or somewhere, and I felt like I was on candid camera. And I'm sitting there, and this vice president says he realizes the deal's not going his way. They're not going to be able to make this kind of commitment. It's a massive, very, very large deal.
Yeah.
And he sits there and he undoes his tie a little bit, kind of sits up. He's frustrated. He and the CISO kind of got into it. They got combative, and it was super awkward. And I'm looking at the CIO going, "Oh God, I don't even know this guy. Cameron sent me in here. I'm just supposed to be taking some notes, out of this deal." And this guy finally looks at him and says, "I need this for my job. Like, the guy in front of me's been promoted. The senior vice president and the president job is now open. I'm either going to get it or I'm going to get fired. And I need the deal. So what's it going to take to get the deal done?" And I felt like this small, just because I was a part of it, just because I felt dirty. I felt like, I cannot believe I'm sitting in this meeting and we brought this guy in here. I can't get to Cameron and cuss him at this point. But he did. He went there. And the CIO, who's, we all know, is one of the nicest guys in the world, and he just kind of eased up and he said, "Johnny, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not going to work."
Yeah.
So whatever, I feel bad that your organization is, a promote or die type organization, but like, we can't do this deal, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
can't fix that for you. Yeah.
I mean, it is one of the hardest things for a seller, especially in the OEM world. I mean, look, you can look at one of them independently, like, God, that guy's an asshole. But the truth be told,
and that doesn't mean that that's wrong, right?
I know.
True.
Collectively, all of them.
I'm sure you were called that at one point.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, collectively, they're not all that. And I get the pressures they're under. I totally understand it. But sellers a lot of times lose the ability to empathize with the customer or to hear themselves talking and to like read it through their lens. I'm like, hey, I'm going to lose my job if you don't buy this. So effing what? Like, right, yeah. I don't mean to be insensitive, but that's not the customer's problem. Now, if they said, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to lose my job if we can't get this deal done. So therefore, I'm willing to go do completely unnatural acts to make this thing happen based on what you're telling me that you need." Now we can find some alignment. Now we can find some interest that benefits both parties. I mean, it's like people have forgotten how a deal works. It's not a one-way street.
But even that, like, so I'm trying. I never was a salesperson. Like, that was my extent of my job. I've sold a lot as a business owner or whatever, but it was never like a salesperson who had a quota and all that stuff, right? So I always think of it one level up, like, how much have you screwed up as an organization if your salespeople are in a position to say what you just said, which is, "I'm willing to give away the farm so I can keep my job." I mean, I'll tell you right now that if that was in my organization, well, that guy's got to go right now anyway, then, like, because he's about to fuck the company to try to protect his job, which is the company's fault for creating that kind of a situation. That should never be able to happen. That should never be possible. Right.
But the next level up's on the hook too. And he or she's willing to do it as well. And the next level up's on the hook. It depends on how big the deal is.
This is great because this is going to feed.
This feeds right into what we're going to talk about later about big companies versus small companies, because I think part of that is what we're talking about. Some of this is a function of size, but maybe not. I'll let you guys talk about it because y'all have both worked in large organizations and now run a small organization. But we'll get there.
Morgan says size matters, man.
Look, but before I don't want to let this go because I do want the good folks listening to this podcast, what kind of sweet deals is Plow offering at year end? I mean, we've got to be rolling out some sweet deals to move some product, right? I mean, don't we have some things coming?
Take a picture with Cameron.
Yeah.
Promo we're running right now.
You know what? That's funny. I know you bring that up in jest, but no. I mean, first of all, we don't deal in public currency. Like we're not publicly traded, so I don't have to meet any. Who gets sad when we missed our forecast? The three of us, right?
Right,
So,
right.
therefore, we're not dealing with, giving away money, good money for bad, kind of thing. I think that's what I'm trying to say. That no, there's no year-end deals. If you don't want to buy it on January 2nd, it costs the same as it did on December 3rd.
If you need it by 12/31, let us know, and we'll try to make something happen. But we're not playing let's make a deal, right? That's not what we do.
I will say, that's funny you bring that up when you need it. That's probably been the bullshit du jour as of late, is if you want it by July of next year, you need to order it by Q2 of 2022.
Yeah, they're trying to flip I feel like they're trying to flip some of the supply chain shit back on the customer, right? As a way of booking revenue in advance, right? It feels like that for real.
Yeah. Now, any of us who understand, generally accepted accounting principles knows that doesn't accomplish the goal. Like you can't book it, and not fulfill it. But there's a lot of
you can try. We've seen that. Yeah, I look. Okay, this just starts to piss me off. So we're gonna have to move on to another topic because it just drives me nuts to think about it, that an organization could put themselves in that kind of a position. But it is what it is. Let's move on to something. Let's move on to something even more fun. It's no secret that big tech has taken it on the chin a bit lately. As layoffs and missed earnings have become the norm for some of the darlings, like Amazon, Meta. I mean, I feel a little bit like Coming to America. It'll always be Facebook, kind of like, is mama call him Clay? I'm gonna call him Clay. I mean, it's still Facebook, whatever they want to call themselves is Facebook.
Meta.
Netflix, Google, Salesforce, on and on. There's a variety of them, Silicon Valley darlings who are doing layoffs. And I'm going to ask you a question. I want to ask you your thoughts about layoffs and sort of mass layoffs, but I want to give a little bit of background on it first. And this is something that sort of, maybe you didn't know this. I wasn't really familiar with it, even though the guy that I'm getting ready to quote is he's one of my favorite business academics, which I know that makes me a giant nerd that I have a favorite business academic, but we're going to put that to the side for now. Yeah. Jeffrey Pfeffer, who's at Stanford, who's awesome. If you haven't read his stuff, you should, but he basically has been on the stump talking, and for years now, actually, basically pointing out that the research on layoffs is really bad in the sense that they don't actually lead to cost cuts, which is the reason people say they do layoffs, right? I mean, why else would you do layoffs, right? Is to try to cut costs. And as it turns out, companies don't actually cut costs when they do major layoffs. Now we're talking about larger companies for the most part, right? He says companies do it because they see other companies doing it and the analysts like it. So I'm just curious, and Emily's going to put the article in the show notes for people to go take a look. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that. And if you guys were ever part of any downsizings or layoffs, and what was yeah, that was for you, Law, being in telco. How was that positioned? How did people talk about it? And what was the lived experience of that?
Well, that's all you.
So it depends on which side you were talking to at the time. If you were talking up, there was one message. If you were talking down, there's another message.
So give us the up and then the down.
Up was got to hit EBITDA, got to make our EBITDA numbers. People got to go home. How do we cut that and make that work? And the way we went about it, or I shouldn't say that. The way lots go about it is not scientific. It's like, where can you make the biggest impact, like with the people? And you better make sure that you got your vacation policy in check too, or it can make it can flip the EBITDA on you.
Because you got to pay out that vacation.
And people not make their EBITDA targets and not get their bonus, which that's a bad place to be. So for us internally at the VP level and above, it was 100% about making even. You weren't making revenue, so how are you going to get these guys bonuses? You're going to get these guys bonuses by making EBITDA. How are you going to make EBITDA? You're going to cut cost, and down to the freaking bone.
Wasn't that? I mean, how much of that really ended up being brain drain? Because my assumption is, if you're going to make an impact, you got to cut people who are expensive. Now, I'm guessing that in organizations, larger ones in particular, that's who we're talking about, there are expensive people who are not particularly productive. I have no doubt about that. Although I would have imagined those people would have, if assuming this wasn't the first round of layoffs ever, my guess is that those people were already gone. So at what point were you literally mortgaging the future to do the layoffs? I mean, what was your experience with that law? Were good people getting cut, or what was the deal?
Yeah, I mean, it was so consistent. I can't remember when we got to the good people. I think the best of the best were, it didn't matter what they were making. Like they stayed, right? The people that everybody really knew were carrying the load and getting it done. Those people weren't at risk. It was the people inside those organizations that had gotten kind of gotten tenured, maybe gotten that 6% raise or that 8% raise or whatever it was year over year over year over year. That's the one they'd grab. It was that's how the vacation thing, the snafu took place, because these people had,
you're giving a real example there, is my assumption.
Tons and tons of vacation that was unaccounted for.
But you got to pay me a year's worth of accrued vacation.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't blame me for your policy. I didn't write it.
The message down though was always, when in doubt, quote Welch. Like, just, what he do? Oh man, he's always cutting the bottom 10%, man. You cut the bottom 10% every year. You flip it and you send the message, you clean it out, right? And the ones that are able to do it, they step up and they perform at a better level. So downward was, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Give me the downward. Close that. Yeah.
Say downward was, hey, you got to do the job. Like, you can't, if you're not doing the job, you don't get to stay. And you go through I'm sure that a lot of organizations go through like some performance evals, and even though you do 6-month reviews and you do annual reviews, all of a sudden this let's do these performance evaluations and let's get those out and let's stack rank our people, and off you go.
Did you refer to that information when it was time to cut, or did somebody just look at the balance sheet and be like, no, that they got to go? I don't care who it is.
I'm not going to answer that question.
Yeah,
it's probably both. I mean, my assumption is a little bit of both, right? I mean, if there's not enough of the D players, well, what are you gonna do? Be moving up the food chain, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's interesting because again, as I referenced just a minute ago, and sort of the small versus big, I try to think about the concept of layoffs within the construct of a 50-person company or a 30-person company, right? And it doesn't exist, right? The idea just does not translate. There is no such thing as a mass layoff for a small company because it's too small, right? Are you going to go in and say, I'm going to cut the bottom 10% of your 30-person company, so you're going to cut 3 people? Like, what? You think about it, it doesn't even make any sense, right? I mean,
fat just usually isn't sitting around inside an organization of that size. So.
Correct. There is no fat. Like you don't. I mean, the fat would be you hired somebody and it was a bad hire, right? And if you're just either for whatever reason not willing to pull the trigger, or it could be lots of reasons why you have 1 or 2 people inside a small organization who are maybe not great, but you haven't fired them. That's the closest thing. I can't think of any other corollary. I mean, is there one?
With a couple dynamics there. Like, if you end up with other people's money funding your business, I think you can get a little fat at times. Sure. and kind of overshoot the mark, and then you've got to.
Well, you're betting on the come, right? Then how much bet on the come are you doing? Like, we're gonna staff up because we got to go. We know we have to grow. We don't really know how we're going to grow, but we have to grow in 2023. So we're going to hire 20 engineers. And they're going to magically they're going to create some new products that we're going to sell. Or we're going to hire 10 sales guys because they're going to go sell whatever we've got on the truck, right? And I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're going to do it, right?
Yeah, different set of dynamics there. Now, the bootstrap organization, you're usually understaffed because you're trying to make sure you've got it all.
It's the opposite, right? Yeah, you're constantly thinking like, what would be better? Would we be better off if we hired 1 or 2 more people? And
yeah. And so, if you're letting people go, some shit's hit the fan more than likely. And so you're at that point, it's just, right. It's injury avoidance.
I had a company of 12 people and I had to fire 2. And that's because we were running out of cash. Right? I mean, it was to try to add a month or 2 runway to see if we couldn't pull a rabbit out of a hat to
elongating the circumstances. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, that's not a layoff. That's an existential crisis, right?
You mentioned the article that you'd read. I do think there's a certain amount, like we all know, analysts and what Wall Street does is it's very incestuous in terms of opinions and monkey see, monkey do type behaviors. And frankly, like it or not, and whether it's right or wrong, really doesn't matter. It's that sort of how things work. And so if somebody is doing it as a preemptive measure, then others have to do it, or those that don't become damned. And
I think if you had a retired CEO who was on this call right now, he would say, we absolutely, and he ran a peer company where the others, the market conditions were tough and they were doing layoffs. He or she would absolutely say, you know what? We did layoffs because everyone else was doing it, and we knew we would get crushed in the markets if we didn't. And you know what? You can't. What are you supposed to say? That they're wrong for that? I mean, it doesn't make it. It's stupid, but it's logical, right? I mean, it doesn't mean it's wrong in that sense, but it's not rational, especially when the whole goal is to save money, right? Where to Law's point, I mean, you gave a funny example about the benefits, but the research shows the severance payments, the contractors that you have to pay, because in general, if you're doing layoffs, most organizations are just not that fat where they can just cut 10 or 20% and like literally nothing, they just dump 20% more work on everybody else. They turn right around and hire people back as contractors because, all this kind of stuff.
More expensive.
That's his point, is it's actually significantly more expensive. It has to be.
I saw a local healthcare company lay off, I'm going to say conservatively, 600 to 800 people in an IT staff. And lo and behold, all these little placement agencies around town are overnight hiring up everybody and their brother and to be in operations and staffing and sales and everything else. And what do? They grab all those people and they shuffle them all right back into the same company
at a 50 to 75% premium, right? Because it's short-term labor. It's just like going to the convenience store to buy milk versus buying it at at Costco. I mean,
it's the book's a little different in terms of the long-term operating expense, and so
right.
It's a premium expense, but yet hits the books different. So it's another big company stupid behavior. But I get it. I understand it. I'm not saying it's silly, but yeah. I think it's silly too. So
long term, it's a competitive disadvantage, in my opinion, for larger companies to have to follow that behavior if that's what the market's dictating. And again, to your point, I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that the folks who are on Wall Street and sort of the analyst community and that group, right, and professional investors, et cetera, these are smart people. They're not stupid, right? We're not talking about lack of intelligence here. It just goes to show you that the power of conventional wisdom and activity bias and comparative thinking can really cause, can really be bad, can create some bad incentives around choices you'd make for long-term performance. Now, what I just said was long-term performance. That assumes that people are interested in long-term performance. And I don't know that the bulk of investors in big companies are interested in long-term performance.
24-hour news cycle, active online trading, low commission trades.
Monthly results, you've got.
I mean, incentive pay structures are not 10-year payouts. They're 1 to 3 years, right? That kind of thing. I mean, it's interesting how much that can skew this kind of thinking. Because if you really did take a long-term perspective, you'd be like, look, I'm not doing that. That's dumb. Long term, we'll be better off if we don't do this, right? And someone who understood the math and thought about it in that way, because it's not like analysts aren't stupid. They understand discounts and present values and all that stuff.
Right.
What's your discount period? What is your time horizon, right? Because if it's 3 years, you don't care what matters in year 10.
That's what's funny. I think that go back maybe 20, 30 years, you pull a lever, the market actually has time to adjust and condition and respond in sort of a ripple effect. Nowadays, you pull the lever, you expect an immediate result. And so, people are constantly making these massive sea changes, and, the market responds literally within an hour or two.
The information gets priced in real fast. Yeah.
Correct. I'm saying so it's, I don't envy anybody's position and all that. I think it's very difficult. But I think that, listen, when you go to become a publicly traded entity, you know what you're getting into.
That's right. Yeah. You're signing up for it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is how it works. So there's another way to fix that. Don't be publicly traded. Like so, just is what it is.
Well, this feels a little bit like an opportune time, and I've referenced it a couple of times. Just talk a little bit about the merits of of small versus big. I've listened to a couple things lately that have kind of a couple of guys talking about sort of the small is beautiful concept, and you can fall in love with that. You can romanticize that all you want. There's some distinct disadvantages to being small. And I don't think anybody's ever run a small business is nodding, going, yeah, no shit, man. And that's real. But as you think about companies like Plow, it doesn't have to be Plow, but companies like us, we're 30, 35 people, right? So companies of 100 or less, or maybe 50 or less, or maybe more than 10. So not startups. We're not talking about, we're not talking about startups. We're talking about, and we're generally talking about what I'd call dull, normal businesses, not venture-backed companies that are trying to, create something and make a market. We're talking about people selling, traditional goods and services, in a competitive marketplace, but are fairly small. And so when you guys think about that, let's start with the advantages. What do you think the advantages a smaller company has over larger companies from a competitive perspective relative to size?
I mean, agility is the first word that comes to mind always. Just agility. I would say agility and flexibility are almost one and the same, depending on your vantage point. But I think that's probably number one. Number two is grit, determination, that type of thing. I think when it's not automatic, if you walk out on the court and you're 7 foot tall, you're probably going to get some points up on the board. Like it is what it is. But you take a 5'5" guy, it's going to be a little bit scrappy. And I think you're going to find smaller organizations can be a little more scrappy because they have to be. Right. They just, they don't have much of a choice, and they usually have a bone to pick or a point to make or something to prove. And I think that can benefit everybody. I think culture attaches to that too. Like you still have the ability to lead by example as it relates to the culture of the organization. And the bigger you get, the harder it gets to maintain that. Yeah. I think a couple other things happen. I think there's an appreciation for the business that you do have that, if you're really big, you can give somebody the walk away, like, so what? I don't care. I mean, you're one of 1,000 customers, get in line. Like you see that sort of attitude doesn't typically exist inside the smaller organizations that are servicing customers. The other thing is, I think in terms of employability, or upward mobility for employees, that exists a lot more inside a smaller organization because there's not as much structure to, there may be good and bad of that, structure to the HR environment to say, well, our policy is you have to be here X number of years before you're able to, eligible for promotion. I mean, smaller shop, are you good at what you do? Can you do more? Great, then take on more. Here you go. Here's opportunity. So, there's a cross training that goes with that too, right? Because in the bigger organization, you get siloed pretty quick. It's like, this is what you do, and your next step typically stays. Right. Yeah. I mean, you're going to have a more fine-grained division of labor, right? Because you've got more people. It makes sense, right? I mean, that would be that's what you would do in that situation. Which creates that fat. You can say that, by the way. Yep. That creates that fat that allows those layoffs. Yeah. Those rifts and those. Yeah, because it's harder to adjust to market conditions, right? I mean, if you've got cross-trained people that can do a variety of different things, again, not because you're smarter, but because out of necessity, you don't have a choice, right? Then that means if one part of your business starts to do better, well, you can just sort of, y'all just focus more over there. Instead of that being 20% of your job, it's now 70%, and you don't really notice. It almost just sort of happens, I think, gradually or organically without you meaning to. Now, catch me on another day, though, and I'll tell you all the things that are positive about a small shop are the same things that are negatives about a small
Sure. No. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not trying to. I don't want to romanticize this. I was using this because we're just picking on big companies about year-end bullshit and layoffs or whatever. They also have. I mean, they've got some real natural advantages, right? And I mean, let's face it. We have some governmental things that really create disadvantages for us as a small company, particularly around benefits, right? The fact that benefits are attached to your workplace, primarily health insurance, is a gigantic problem for small companies, and none of us can do anything about that unless and until the law changes, right? We're never going to be able to compete with GM or whoever in terms of what we can do because of this, because it's one of those where size gives you an advantage in terms of purchasing. and we're never going to get that. So,
well, you get employer, tax subsidies and the.
Oh yeah, I wasn't even getting into the crony capitalism, getting to know your congressman and getting some bullshit, advantage, which we're never going to get, right? I mean,
Yeah, I was going to say.
Now we don't waste any time trying to do it either, so we're not spending any money on people trying to, feed off that, which is great. But you also sometimes you win at that, and you hit the lottery, and it works out, and that's just not going to happen for us, despite the fact that everybody in government talks about how great small business is. I mean, come on.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So we can bitch about that all we want, but
sure, it's not worth it. Yeah.
Now, if I were the recipient of that, I might have a different opinion, but
yeah, right.
I get
I'm
it.
a big supporter of it. So yeah, I do think the smaller companies, well-run small companies, have a strong advantage. But just because you can go out and conjure up a few nickels to rub together and get somebody on a W-2 doesn't necessarily mean that you have any business running a company. And we've seen a lot of that too, where I think as an employer, even as a company hiring people, it makes it difficult to. Sorry, I just got an instant message that came through that was quite distracting. I'm not going to go there. But I think there's risk in small businesses. I think you've got to have, some tenure behind them to prove that they've got some, sustenance. I know for the first few years, trying to convince large customers that were working with us that we were going to be around, the default answer was, well, you guys are small. How many people do you have? How long have you been in business? And, you're always like, not a lot of people, not very long in business, but I promise you we're going to do a really good job. And, that all just is lip service until you've got some
sure. Yeah.
And time behind you.
And that's a distinct disadvantage for small companies that, in essence, there is no large company that's not been around for very long and doesn't have a lot of employees. Like, so that, what I mean?
Big companies that are overnight companies scare the shit out of me.
Well, those are almost always the most spectacular failures, right? But in general, the average large company been around a long time, been around,
grown through it,
a couple decades, plus whatever, now not forever, because big companies die all the time. People forget that. If you look at, go back and look at the Dow Jones, and you see, the companies that, the Facebooks and Amazons of the world, 100 years from now, some of those people are going to look back and go, I don't even know what that is. Like that, it's because they'll be completely gone, right? Even though today it seems like they're here forever and they'll never go away. But it's more dynamic than it appears. But if you're a 2-year-old company with 4 employees, it's a challenge, right? That's you've got reputational. There's a risk, because if you do sell to larger companies, now if you sell to other small companies, it's maybe not a big deal. But if you sell to larger companies, the last thing somebody at a big company wants to tell their boss is that they hired a vendor who was small and then didn't work out, right? Now, if they hire a big one and they suck, they don't get in trouble for that. It's like the old buying IBM thing from back in the day, right? But that just shows you how risk averse and stupid that is, frankly. But that's back to the incentives. There were 2 things I thought that, if you don't mind, that I'd like to share around small companies that I think we forget about as advantages for everybody. And the first one is, if you're small, you don't actually have to get that much business to be viable, right? Which is a huge advantage, because if you're real big, you got to get think about how hard it is to move the needle, right? If you're big, you've got your customer, you either got to get a lot more customers, or your customers have got to get a lot bigger, right? And that's every year.
Everybody off.
or you can lay everybody off, and it's actually not going to save you the money that you think it's going to, right? Those are your options. Whereas a small company, you don't have to get everybody in a market segment to be successful, right? So you can be more niche. You can do things in a way that you can't at a big company. And then the second one was that longer term perspective that we talked about. Again, assuming you're not, haven't taken investment money and someone else is telling you what to do, which is a very, very small percentage of small companies. Most small companies are owner financed and maybe have some debt, which is very often personal guarantees. So the bank or lending company is not really getting in your shorts. They just want the payments. They don't really give a damn about how you do things. And they're fine for you to live forever, because they'll just keep making the payment. That's perfectly fine with them. So those are the 2 things that kind of came to mind that are really structural advantages. It's hard for a big company. They cannot compete with that. They have lots of other advantages. Those are not two of them. Anyway, we could go on that for a while, but we'll move on to kind of the last little bit here. And since it's end of year, we talk some about sales and some of that stuff. The other thing that goes on this time of year, obviously, is budgeting and planning for the next year, which we don't necessarily call it this, and in a big company, you certainly don't. But basically, it's a whole set of predictions, right? Any exercise about saying what you're going to do next year is a prediction exercise. Even though, again, no one calls it that inside a big company because that sounds like, doesn't sound very scientific.
Performa is far more sexy.
Yeah, it sounds way scientific. Like, because if it's on a spreadsheet, it must be true, right? Never mind all the assumptions, right? But, it's prediction time. The media is going to be filled with talking heads pontificating on what's going to happen in 2023. People in companies are pontificating on what's going to happen inside their company. Again, they don't call it that, but they are. And then, everything that's going on, inflation, recessions, wars, pandemics, all this shit that's been going on last couple of years, that has gone on forever. It's just felt more intense lately. The internet's going to be, and the airwaves are going to be full of it. And to quote one of my former guests, Dr. John Petrucelli, almost all of it is, bullshit, right? That's exactly what it is. It's bullshit. None of these prognosticators have any idea what's going to happen. They're guessing. They won't say they're guessing, but they're guessing. And if they get it right, they're lucky, right? Most likely they'll be wrong because it's really hard to predict stuff. Law, what is flying around your computer? Is that light or is it bugs? You're on mute.
It's light. He has somehow captured light and made it fly around.
You know what's funny is that sunlight coming from there is the same sunlight that's going through your window back there, 8 hours apart.
8 hours.
I'm only an hour apart. What are you talking about? 8 hours. Where do you think I am?
Where are you? You're at home.
I know. I'm 1 hour apart.
Listen, I'm dialed in.
You're an hour from me?
8 hours. You mean distance. I thought you meant time zones. I'm sorry. Well, it's only 6.5, but that's fine.
Two Einsteins, 7.5, whatever.
Between here and North Carolina, it takes 8 hours.
Like, whatever. Okay, I get you now. There was still some shit flying around your computer that looked like moths. So.
Well, I also gave a little pause and a wipe because
it
was distracting me.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Anyway, we were talking about prognosticating and predicting, and the bottom line is predicting is super hard. So, if you had a crystal ball, or the genie showed up with 3 wishes, what do you wish we could more easily predict at Plow? Because none of it is easy. So what would you want to be easier? I'm not saying perfect, but easier.
In context of this conversation, I would say success rate and ramp time of new sellers.
The people themselves, not deals, but the people.
Deals are out there. Deals are plentiful. Deals are being won every day that we're not involved in. It's because we're not out in front of them. But to expand upon that, technology ages. Technology empowers. It's, if it's 3-year or 5-year life cycles, you got to look at it. We've got people who bought stuff 2 and 2.5 years ago that still haven't gotten their stuff. It's going to be halfway aged off on their books before they even take possession of it. Like the constant expiration of assets and things left some pent up, buying sort of need that has yet to be satisfied. So to think that this all is going to dry up and go away, at least within the foreseeable 36 months, to think there's going to be some downturn in the tech economy, at least in the markets we play in, I think is crazy. I mean, now if cash dries up for everybody, it's a different story. So, there's a ripple effect of the economics of whatever supplying our customer base revenue supply chain. But I mean, at the end of the day, I don't see much change in our space. So it's really, I wouldn't want to do anything if I wouldn't want any wishes granted to me in this hypothetical scenario that gave me a better opportunity or some sort of insulated capacity in what we think is going to happen in the market as a downturn. Because I don't think it's happening. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, what I'd like to do is to have more certainty with the performance of expense. So if we sign up for or invest X amount of dollars into however many bucks in a seat to go tackle or find net new revenue that's existing in the marketplace. I'd want to know if I put $1 in, I can get $3 out in this period of time because they're going to perform. That would be what I'd want.
Got it. And I think a lot of small business people would say exactly the same thing. Although I'm not sure a big company response would be similar to that. It's just I don't know that for sure. Law, what about you? What comes to mind for you?
It's in line with that. It's the next.
The same opinion. You have to come up with
let me put the sun back on you. The next, it's the next competitive advantage. It's that next thing that's out there from a service perspective that we could embrace and get in front of and be first to market with. And then it's, ramping of sellers. It's the insight to revenue to me. The clearest insight to revenue that would allow you to take those investments that you want to make and push the chips in and really accelerate things. To me, that's what I would want to see.
Most of everything that people do in these businesses, it's a guess. It's a wild ass guess, but with a few indicators and then a whole lot of confidence or some degree of confidence. So, I hear all kinds of people like, this is what I'm going to invest in. This is what I'm going to get out of it. And they're just super confident about it. I'm like, okay, I'll talk to you in a year and we'll see how right you were. Now, most of the time, I think that they're right because they had the balls to do it. To be frank.
This comes back to, what you're investing in. I don't know that there's ever been a time in the history of modern business where hiring good people who are good at things and more than one thing is a bad investment, right? There may be times. Now, again, the time horizon matters. It might not be 12 months. It might not be 24 months. But when I think about I look at this question that I wrote, what are the best ways to deal with the fact that the future is essentially unknowable, right? And there's only one answer to that, which is try to be good at some things that you feel like are pretty perennially needed. And then if you can do that, right, then you can at least sleep pretty well at night, barring something very unusual happening, right? Let's face it, if there's a world war, we're all going to have to make some serious adjustments, right? But that's not what most of us, you don't want to factor that in your planning. Are you seeing that too, Cameron? See, I'm not the only one.
Did you see something?
It's like a moth flying around your computer.
Oh, yeah, we've got a lot of moths in the house. We're going to tell you, we're raising moths now.
Okay. You're like James Gum. You're like James Gum from Silence of the Lambs.
Wait a minute.
Little butt person.
Anyway. All right, look, we're going to move on. We're going to wrap it up. This could go on. I could talk to you boneheads forever, and especially if we can quote movies from the 80s and 90s. We could do that all day. So let's wrap it up with a little holiday fun, since we were supposed to have a party to get to, but that already happened. Let's talk about a few of our holiday favorites. So, Cameron, you first. What's your favorite gift you got as a child?
A guitar amplifier.
Law?
A big one. Yeah.
Because most people have one that hits immediately. I do.
Redline PL20 BMX bike with a damn good chain.
That's pretty smooth.
I got a Rampar 400 being the same thing bike, and it was bad. I was so excited I could hardly stand it.
So good.
Vintage BMX bikes are on the rise. Just FYI. Oh yeah.
I never forget saying, "Oh my God, it's got a damn good chain." And my granddad, who was sitting on the couch, I was 12 or 11, almost had a heart attack. Like, no, that's what it's called.
It's called.
Yeah, you weren't cursing. You were calling it its name. Yeah.
It's what it's called.
All right. Favorite Christmas song? Favorite holiday song?
Am I up first? Honestly, Eartha Kitt's Santa Baby, I'm a fan of. I like that song.
Gonna go creepy. Good job. I like it.
Check the balls on that old holly. La, 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 la.
Well, I don't remember that one. Yeah. What, Christmas time? That's also a great song.
Yeah, there's Christmas time and Christmas in Hollis is you can't.
Great song, dude.
It totally is. I got to go with 12 Days of Christmas by Bob and Doug McKenzie. That's a solid. It's solid. All right, favorite Christmas movie. Law, you're up.
Oh, dude, Christmas Vacation, hands down. It's not even close.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's easy.
That's not even fair.
And the last one, your favorite holiday cocktail. Remember, I had these questions. We were supposed to be going to the Christmas party from doing this podcast, so it was a little more relevant at that point. But do the best you can.
Cameron's is going to be so much better than mine because he's going.
Well, he's going to have some. He's going to pull out his little kit and show us how he makes it. Yeah,
there's no question.
Yeah,
I'm probably just going to stick with something basic, which is just a good old Manhattan. Sitting around the fire with a good Manhattan.
I was going to say anything brown. Yeah, nothing fancy. Like Christmas cocktail, whatever.
Yeah, bourbon. I mean,
something brown.
Bourbon.
Yeah,
Bourbon.
Keep it simple. Yep.
All right, boys.
Cool.
Thanks, Lane.
Thanks, Lane.
Talk to y'all later. Bye. Okay, that's a wrap for 2022. I'd like to personally thank everyone at Plow who has helped make this podcast possible, especially Emily Starnes and Talia Brooks, who have made it happen every 2 weeks this year. Last but not least, thanks to everyone who has listened at some point during 2022. We really appreciate you taking time to listen. I hope you feel it was worth your time. Happy holidays. We'll be taking a break until after the first of the year. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would become a subscriber wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, that would really help us out. Or you can just go old school and tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, and hell, anybody else who you think might want to hear something like this to listen in. If you're on social media, make sure to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @cuttheshit_pod. We are also on TikTok @cuttheshitpod, all one word, where we post lots of clips from the podcast. And last but not least, you can also watch the YouTube version of the show on our YouTube channel @Plow Networks. Until next time, take care and have a great day.